I'll sound the gong 3 times and let's see what happens.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it worked. Hi, Keith.
Hello there, Kat.
How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
I'm really looking forward to talk with you today about the power of silence, because I believe that silence is incredibly powerful and really a super important part of the spiritual inward journey. But it's not something that you would see a lot of people promote or even do. And I guess it's because, there's literally nothing to do. So it's quite hard to get your head around why you should be silent when everything tells you to distract yourself with stuff. But really, it's so simple and it's so powerful. So I look forward to just have a conversation around that.
Certainly. Yes, it's a subject very close to my heart as well.
When did you discover silence for yourself? What was your first experience with it?
Well, something I'd wanted to do for a long time was to go away and have a retreat for myself. And then finally it happened. And there is a 25-acre piece of land belonging to a charity. And it's on the border between Wales and England, just on the side of Wales. So what I did is I took my geodesic dome and everything I would need, and I set myself up on that land. There was no one there at all. And I had 8 days completely on my own, totally in the silence. And after 8 days, 30 people turned up and I joined in with them, and we all worked to build this roundhouse that they've been building for some years. At the end of the weekend, they all went away, and I had another 8 days completely on my own, completely in the silence. So that really is what did it for me. And I received so much in so many different ways on that one single event.
Wow. My longest was 5 days in 2008 in Bali. I went on a silent retreat, which was pretty profound as well. Yeah.
Yes.
What did you do? How did you spend your days? What do you do in silence, basically? I think that's what people ask themselves. What do I actually do in silence? Nothing.
Well, the biggest thing that I realized is that I would be doing a lot of normal things like cooking food and walking, and I would always go with my drum and I would stand on this tree stump and I would drum down the sunset. So from the moment the very bottom of the sun touched the horizon, and I'd be drumming, which is about 7 or 8 minutes until the sun had completely gone down. That's something I did every day. And I would say I was inspired to do that through what I call accessing silent knowledge. So to me, one of the primary benefits we get from the power of silence is we get connected to information, knowledge, which is very useful for us. So I did that. But the big thing for me was realizing that I would do an activity of what it was, cooking, washing up, drumming, whatever it was. And then when I finished the activity, I simply stopped and I didn't do anything. And in shamanism, we call this not doing. So as well as silence, I had periods of not doing. And there was always this period of not doing. And then after a period of not doing, then the impulse would come to go do something else. So I found that really helpful, because I'm a person up until that point who was a compulsive overworker and overdoer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think many of us are. That makes me really curious though, like, because for me, when I do silent retreats now on my own once a month, a full day of silence, and depending on my state of being, which is usually not by nature quite restless, I also do a lot, I have a really, really hard time to sink into it. So the first few hours I'm like going crazy, like I have all kinds of stuff coming up, like, no, you can't do this today because you need to respond to this email, you can't, blah blah. I mean, of course it's all BS, because I knew before, when I got into the silence, that those 24 hours will be just for myself, same as people who will come into the space to meditate, not to meditate, to be silent once a week, know that in that half an hour the world is not gonna go down, and they can be there and it's going to be okay, yet the mind will come up with all kinds of stories why you can't be silent. And I find it really hard to pass that point. What would you recommend to people?
I'm glad you use that actual word about the mind, because something I do is I host retreats with plant medicines and I speak to people quite a lot about the rational mind. But my teacher, the one who taught me shamanism, he had a very simple aphorism, and it was, the mind plays tricks and games. That's what it does. It plays tricks and games. So as soon as you're aware of the fact that that's what it is, it's a trickster, it's a game player, then this enables you to not take it so seriously. And it's also really helpful to start to develop a part of yourself which is actually observing it. So the mind says, I must do this, or you must do this, or you should, or you have to. Just observe what's going on. And when you observe what's going on, that starts to give you the ability to become detached from the impulses, which I say it like this: if someone is a bully and someone actually stands there and describes the bully's behavior in the present moment with no judgment whatsoever, that completely diffuses the power of the bully. It doesn't work. In the same way, our rational minds can be bullies. In fact, they can be amongst the most severe bullies we ever experienced, not other people, just our own rational mind.
Yeah.
So because you suddenly start to observe what it's doing, and you remember, plays tricks and games, that takes away its power.
Yeah, I so agree. Although I've been meditating and doing this kind of stuff for a few years now, for a decade, I believe it is already. And even I have a hard time to zoom myself out and just observe it. So I can imagine that for somebody who has never been in silence, it's going to be really tricky to even distinguish between these are my thoughts and now I'm observing my thoughts. Is there anything that you can do to get into that observer mode quickly, would you say?
How? Get into the observer mode. Okay. One of the best things you can do to get into the observer mode is to start to become aware of your breathing. Because we're always breathing all the time. But if you become aware of your breathing, and bearing in mind you haven't got to speak because you're doing the silence, so that's not going to block your breathwork practice. Starting to deepen the breathing, deepen the breathing has the ability to calm down the emotions, but also calm down the mind. And as soon as the mind starts to calm down, it's so much more easy for you to be able to switch into observer mode. I was actually trained to switch into observer mode by Rastafarians when I went to Jamaica, and it's a very much an integral part of their practice out there. They have a practice which they call Sata, and they smoke their sacramental herb, and then they sit down and they go into silence and they slow everything down with the breathing, and that helps them so that they cultivate the state of the observer. And to them, that's ever so important as a spiritual practice and as a way to really make progress in your life.
Yeah, totally. So I guess the message here also for people is to just practice becoming the observer of it. Like, don't get too frustrated when the thoughts like really race and you're like, I can't do this. No, you can, but you got to give yourself some time.
And then to remember to breathe with awareness.
Yeah.
And then remember to slow the breath down and deepen the breath. And that has such a good effect. One of the best things, if a person is in a state of acute emotional distress, it's very hard for them to do this. But if they've got a friend who can remind them, it'd be a good idea to really deepen your breathing now. That will pull them right out of it. So the same way as this, because in a sense, I'd argue that the state that we were in just at the beginning of the silence practice, it is a bit emotional. It can be a bit
Totally. It is. Yeah. That's why I think it is so hard, especially in the beginning, because you're being asked to stop, and then all kinds of stories, all kinds of stuff comes up, and it's most of the time quite uncomfortable, because maybe there's people who just have nice thoughts, but I definitely don't belong to that group then, because for me, just all the nonsense and the bullshit comes up, and you should be doing this, and because otherwise you're not good enough, like it goes down that kind of road. And so I think if you, as you said, if you're not aware of can't observe that and you get caught up in that thinking, it gets too painful, and then you will take the exit and you will start distracting yourself again by talking, by listening, by whatever. So it's really crucial to allow yourself that time to sink into presence, to sink into the silence. Don't expect it to be an easy ride. It isn't. But once you come out on the other side, I would say, there's just like, there's so much there on the other side once your mind slows down and you really sink into the present moment. I'm always fascinated. It does take me, when I do longer silent retreats, so like longer, a day or so, it takes me a few hours, but then there comes this point where I'm there, I'm present, I'm not distracted by my thoughts anymore, and I can actually enjoy the cup of tea or the coffee or the bird, and I have such a different level of awareness. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Now, listening to what you just said, that reminds me of something else, which is, when you're in silence, there's nothing to stop you from moving. You don't have to be sitting in complete immobility. And in fact, in a way, it can actually be helpful, especially if you've got something really mundane and repetitive to do, like a little bit of cleaning, or supposing it's time to cook, something like that. That can, when you're doing like a whole day, you've got no alternative because you've got to cook for yourself, you've got to do all the things. So I find that can be very helpful. Another thing can be very helpful is if you've got a particular bodywork practice that you like and benefit from, that can help you take the step from not being in silence into being in silence. That can help.
Yeah, totally. And actually, I think that's a good point, because people might think that when we talk about silence, that means sitting on the floor or on the wherever and meditate all day long. But we are not talking about meditation. Like, meditation can be a part of the silence, but that's actually not what, the state that we necessarily want to get people in. It's simply about being present with what is. And if what is means I need to cook myself a meal because I'm hungry, or I need to clean my apartment, or I need to walk the dog, well, then that is what is, and that is what we should do with full awareness. And I think that's exactly the difference between a meditation practice and a silent practice, because in meditation, you just sit. I mean, you're also just present with the present moment, but in a different way. I feel like in silence, it's almost like consciousness now in action, because you're actually paying a lot of attention to every single movement that you do, to every single, thing that you touch.
Very much so. And it's actually possible to reach the point where you start to realize, I'm really enjoying washing this dish.
Yeah.
I'm not stressing about it. I'm not rushing to get the job finished because I want to do something else. I'm just actually here. And then the other thing I haven't mentioned at all yet, which is also a really great thing to do, which is to go outside into the nature and to start to move more slowly than perhaps you would do normally, because you are then giving more attention to whatever is around you. And then that's something that I particularly appreciate and enjoy, which is called extroverted sensing. So in extroverted sensing, what you do is you take your attention out of yourself into your environment, wherever it may happen to be. Like in this second, I've got the tree outside, I've got the flowers here, I've got the bowl here. When we start to extend our senses outwards, that can be a really interesting thing to play around with, as well as, of course, to stop that and then bring your senses inward to become aware of your body and how the body is feeling and any sensations in the body. So to take the senses either outward or inward in that time can be a really surprising thing to do in terms of what you might become aware of.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so true. I usually start my silence days inside, and then at some point I go out in nature, and at that point my mind is already a little bit quieter. So that's also what I find fascinating, like literally nothing to do. So what you can do is sit under the tree or sit wherever, or walk or so. And somehow the time goes by very quickly at some, like in the beginning, it moves so slowly. You're like, oh shit, like, how am I gonna do this? And then by the time it's afternoon, I'm sometimes thinking to myself, I literally just sat under the tree, and maybe this is the fifth tree now. I move around quite a bit, and time passes by, So that means that there is something happening, but on a different level. It's this like, yeah, watching the birds. Wow, so much here, watching people, anything.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a really important point. Yes. The ability to just literally become aware of things as you're. So we learn a lot about our consciousness in this sense. Suddenly we're aware of the sound of the birds, and it's all about sounds, and sometimes it's something else. And then the other, you just mentioned about the nature of time. The nature of time becomes very fluid and elastic when you start to play with being in the silence.
Mm.
And that's a really fun thing to experience too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this is very, like, last time that I did it, I was very mind blown. I'm like, wow, I can't. And I did it even longer. I think it was 2 days, and I was like, wow, how did these 2 days just pass by quickly, but in a different way, not in the busy sense, like, oh, I'm so busy, my days have just passed by. They passed by. They were also so rich on, yeah, on what was actually happening. So there's so much happening around us, and we don't pay attention to it because we are so busy with podcasts, with books, with this and that. So I find that every time I do it, it helps my awareness days, if not weeks after, to
Yes.
recognize everything that is actually happening around me and the beauty of life and all of these things. So it's not even a one-time thing. It's not that, you do it one day and you feel amazing after that, but it's like, it's the ongoing perception that changes. I think that's important actually to realize for people. It does something to you on a long-term basis.
It certainly does, yes. And you've skirted around the subject, but let's really bring it to the forth. Sometimes there can be awarenesses that come up that can be disturbing,
Mm-hmm.
even painful. It's possible in a state of silence to have, for example, an understanding of maybe something that you did in the past where the consequence of your actions was hurtful for another person, or maybe there was a moment when you could have done something and you didn't do it. And at first, this might seem quite shocking and disturbing that such things might come up. But there's such a wonderful benefit because this is actually a part of your greatest inner spiritual growth is when you start to become aware
Mm-hmm.
of the consequence of your actions in the very safe place of being just you in the silence. So sometimes if something unpleasant comes up, that's like a real victory.
Totally. There's a saying, what resists persists. And that's why these moments of silence and just a simple allowance of these things to come up can be so powerful, because you don't have to do anything about it. You just have to have it come up, acknowledge it, and then it doesn't persist. It can just move out. So it is, yeah, great for spiritual growth in so many ways.
Yeah, just letting things come up as they do.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
actually a question for me that I wanted to ask you, but I think I just answered it myself, is to how to, manage that emptiness and how to manage the fact that, because when nice things come up, it's not a problem, but how to manage the emptiness when shit comes up, like,
Yeah. I want to give you a really practical example. This is going to seem really pretty crazy. So I get in my hand and I just pinch the skin of my hand with my nails. And at first I can feel that's pain. But what can happen is if I actually really move my awareness right into what's going on, I actually change the quality of what's going on. So in the sense of what we're talking about now, when these feelings come up, the more we can be present with them, the more we can immerse ourselves. It's a very counterintuitive thing because we've all been taught as a matter of survival to always move away from pain, move towards pleasure. Because in the silence context, if some painful memory does come up, one of the most powerful things we can do is actually to move into that feeling, because the more we move into it, the more quickly it can transform. And the more we try to pull away from it, the more it persists. And it's only persisting because it's saying, but I want you to feel me fully. And as soon as you felt it fully, it's gone. And you're on
Mm,
to the next thing, whatever it might be.
yeah, totally. I think that's even a good what you just did with the pinching, I think that's actually something that people could literally do when there's some pain coming up, just knowing, okay, it's happening.
It's easy. It really
Yeah.
is. Very non-threatening because you've got the power over the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. So that might be helping people psychologically as well. Okay,
Yeah.
something comes up. Okay, I'll press a certain part in my body and I know it's painful now, but it's going to evaporate. Or it's going to turn into something okay-ish. Yeah.
Now, I will mention something a little bit controversial because people are going to have wildly different opinions about this.
Yeah.
It might be something you might want to consider to have a notebook and a pen by you so that if something comes up that you feel that's really significant, then you can write it down. And I'd like to make a distinction here between people who've been brought up outside of the mainstream society. I know a very small number of people, for example, they never went to school of any kind ever. For such a person, they will not need to write things down because they have had a different form of education. But for those of us who have been mainstream schooled and blackboards and teachers and notes and all that, we don't have that ability to recall because of what's been done to us. So for us, it's really helpful to be able to just make a note of something, and then that could be useful for when you finish your period of silence. You might want to take action on it, for example.
Yeah, totally. I personally prefer to not even write down anything, but I know for some people it's helpful, especially in the beginning. I believe that what really wants to persist will stay. Like what is really the message that you should be getting in that silence will also stay, whether you write it down or not.
Yes,
That's at
that's a
least my experience.
very helpful belief system to have, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
Because it can also be when you have a journal that you actually end up writing the entire, like, I don't know, day or so, something. And that can also be a distraction in itself. So maybe if people use the journal, maybe use it like occasionally or after a certain period of time, but not carry it around all the. I mean, we are talking half an hour in our weekly silence anyway. So
Yes, we're
so
talking about
it's not
short
too.
periods of time, so it's less relevant. It's just if you want to take it further, it's something that comes up for people to consider, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or journal after. I think actually that's a good point. What should people be doing after silence? Like how to end the silence?
How to end the silence is exactly the same as ending a fast. You don't want to go straight to somewhere like McDonald's when you've ended a fast. You want to gradually bring yourself back into the consumption of foods and drinks. So it's very much the same with ending a period of silence, gently. So I have a feeling what you said is a good idea, actually. If you're going to do a short period of silence, it might be really appropriate just to get a pen and just see what comes up. And creative writing is a wonderful thing to do. That's what I say. Do anything creative, like a little writing, a little drawing, a little singing. And that's another thing, because when they're talking about periods of silence for longer than a short period of time, I define, everyone's got their own way to define this, but for me, what silence really is about is no screens, no screens, and no screens. And it's very much about not listening to recorded music, but if you suddenly get the inspiration to sing, please sing. And if you feel like you want to play a musical instrument, the same thing. So it's not that there should be no sounds whatsoever when we're doing these longer periods of silence. It's just that you are not having it coming from another source, it's coming from within yourself. So when you have a creative impulse, just to simply get a piece of paper and just do a little drawing, anything I go for. Or another thing is literally to go in and start cooking, but with the music off rather than the music on as it might normally be. So some kind of an activity, especially if you have been sitting for the half hour or the hour, then that would be probably the best thing, is to segue out of the silence that you've been doing into some kind of a movement. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. Just to make it easier to get slowly back. I think that's important. I'm thinking of the people who might be doing that and might be doing the silence and then have to go back to work. So I would like to encourage these people, if that's the case for them, to at least take 15 minutes to do that, what you just said,
Yes,
before you go back into the normal rhythm. And then
and
also
also,
observe yourself, how it is to be in a call with other people once you've just really sunk into presence. And yeah.
but because you've said what you've just said, let's address the people who don't have 15 minutes. You haven't got 15 minutes, you've got one. That's
Mm-hmm.
it, you've only got one. Deepen the breathing, do some breath work, a full exhalation, a short pause, then a full inhalation, hold, full exhalation. If you do it three times, full inhalation, pause, exhalation, pause, that will take you a minute, and that will do something really helpful to you, because it will actually enable you to get the very best out of everything you've just been through. And it will prepare you and supercharge you for whatever you're going to do next. That's probably what I recommend if you're really short on time.
Yeah, good point. Yes. Let me see, did I wrote down anything else? Yeah, my questions are mostly answered, but one thing that I want to also say is, but in the context of going on this weekly silence, group silence, social silence, gathering in humanplus, is that people can really do that anywhere. So of course, because it's just half an hour where we are actively in silence, and then there's a bit more time to come back. People are welcome to sit on the couch, walk around, do whatever they want to do. So they don't have to sit. They can also walk or take a walk in nature or so.
That's my view. There's something we haven't mentioned yet, and I feel it's of inestimable value. Go to bed. Now, this is quite the confrontational thing for some people. Some people really don't like the idea of going to bed at any other time except when they're going to go to bed at night to sleep for 8 or however many hours.
Mm-hmm.
Very profound thing to do is simply go to bed. And it gives me an opportunity to share what was one of my most powerful experiences of silent knowledge. So there's something called monatomic gold, and it's usually in the form of ormus, and it comes as either a liquid or a powder, and you take a certain amount of it. So for whatever reason, I was obviously guided to do this. So I had my ormus, a liquid, and I took my dose, and then I was instructed to go to bed. So it was like 10:30 in the morning, a weekend. So I just went to bed, and I just got into bed and I lay there. And at first it was like, why am I in bed? Could be worse, it's comfortable. So I just lay there. And after a few minutes, I thought, might as well close my eyes. I'm here. I did not go to sleep. I went on what for me was one of the most extraordinary journeys I've ever been on in my life. And I found myself, first of all, leaving behind this planet, literally floating up, leaving the planet, looking at the earth below, and moving very, very fast and incrementally faster and faster, seeing the entire solar system just disappearing off into a dot, and just seeing myself surrounded by stars, and then pulling out of the galaxy, and suddenly I could see the galaxy way, way, way over there. And I was just in this, what we call the intergalactic void, which is a wonderful place to go. Whenever someone does training with me, I take them on this journey. It's become an integral part of the training practice. But we go further out, further out, further out, and then suddenly I'm in the void. It's all the blackness, and I can see fuzzy dots, and each fuzzy dot is not a star, it's a galaxy. And out and out and out, and suddenly right out, and I am simply immersed in this glorious white light. And I didn't know what on earth was going on at the time, but eventually I realized it was simply I was simply fully present to the source.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the white light, and then with my 360-degree awareness, because I'll tell you, as a shaman, we lose this thing about having these two eyes looking this way. It's 360-degree. So in my 360-degree view, everything was light except when I looked really closely with my 360-degree view, I could see little black dots. And the first question in my mind was, what are those black dots? And it was like, boom, each one's a universe. So I literally was able to leave behind our universe, be in the source, and
Wow.
was this monotonic gold and lying down. with nothing to do, and no agendas, no appointments. So that really did surprise me big time. Never expected that was going to happen.
Did you say you took some psychedelics?
No.
No.
Monatomic gold.
Monotonic gold. What is that?
Monatomic gold. In India, they heat gold to extremely high temperatures to create a white powder. In other parts of the world, they extract the gold out of seawater. So the monatomic gold I was having was literally the gold extracted out of the minerals, extracted out of seawater in liquid form. That's all it was. So just literally a few little drops of this monatomic gold, basically extracted seawater. That's it. Nothing else. That's all I had. And I never knew that. I've been working with that monatomic gold for some months at that point, having it every day. Had nothing special happen at all, and then boom, that's what happened on that particular occasion. But I put it down to the fact that I had completely surrendered to the experience of, I'm in bed, there's nothing to do. I've closed my eyes, I'm enjoying being here, and it just all happened.
I think that's also an important point, really, to have no expectations and to surrender to whatever is, right? Only then these very profound things can happen, because when you go in with the expectation, wow, I will have this profound realization or experience, or I'm gonna zoom out and see the earth or something like that, it is never going to happen. It could be extremely dull, actually, you know, like your experience could be extremely dull and boring, but then that is the experience that you needed in that moment. And yeah, like it's really important to not go in with the mindset of I'm going to get something out of this, because
exactly
nothing is gonna
it's the exact same as plant medicine in that sense. A person that's loaded up with all these intentions get the incredible disappointments are the ones that don't do the research. The ones that have usually the most profound experiences. And it reminds me of the opportunity to mention something else as well, to do with silent knowledge. So there was one time when I was working with one person and doing shamanic training for the weekend, and he was doing a particular journey, which I've taken people through many, many times. And usually I'd just be doing the drumming, but I was told, do the journey as well. And so I did, and I found myself in what is called the mycelium. So if you think about some bread that grows moldy, that's a fungus grows on the bread. If you buy camembert cheese or Stilton cheese, you've got fungus growing on the cheese. So the way a fungus operates, it produces mycelium, which is like threads that spread throughout the material that digest the food. So the idea is, if we actually look into the earth, our biosphere, we discover that under the ground, the roots of all the trees and the plants are all connected by a fungus. So this is what we call the mycelium. So I was very well aware for years of there being this mycelium, this incredible fungal super high wave connection under the ground. But I was doing this journey and I was just traveling out into the upper world, and I suddenly saw for the first time that mycelium that I've been consciously aware of below the ground exists above the ground. And then there's something that happens. It was 2 years ago, scientists started to release pictures of the void between the galaxies, and they reveal that there's these little threads, and the threads look exactly the same as the threads of the mycelium of the fungus. And I realized actually this concept of the mycelium, it's below ground, it's above ground. And because I was giving myself no agenda, no pressure, not having to do anything, I was simply doing the drumming and this stuff was coming out. The silent knowledge, it just drops the information in. So the drop that I got there is as above, so below. There are these fungi with these mycelium below the ground. It's the same thing out there. And in fact, shamanically speaking, how I can go anywhere in space time to do a shamanic journey for someone, a client who's got a health problem or some other problem, it's all possible, because what we do as shamans, we enter the mycelium, we can go anywhere in space time and connect with the event that's relevant to look at with that person to give them the help. So it's all relates.
Wow.
And it's all possible simply by stopping doing stuff.
It's doing that, it's so powerful, and it's so crazy that that we are not doing more of the being part, you know, because that is literally where all this is so powerful. That reminds me, you just said silent drop, and I also would like to share a story there, different from the different nature from what you are saying, but also definitely falls into the category of silent drop. And it actually has to do with you. 2 years ago, when we spoke, you said to me, you're looking at my birth chart, and you said to me, Kat, it's important for everyone to be in the now. But for you, it's really like the most important thing that you can do. And you were really stressing that point, like a couple of times, that you really need to be in the now and only in the now. And it's one of those things that, you know, yes, I need to be in the now, but until it moves from here to here, you know, it's quite hard to maintain sometimes. So I would always, over the years, I would always hear you saying like, you really need to be in the now. I'm like, yeah, I know I need to be in the now. And on my last silent day, as I'm sitting under the tree, I suddenly, out of nowhere, as it happens, right, get these really profound insights about my past, my present, my future. And I just started to understand. It was kind of showing me like, here you were in the now, see what happened. Here you were out of the now, see what happened, you know? And it was showing me all of these different situations in which I was either fully in alignment and how, you know, things were progressing and felt good. And then whenever I was out of that, you know, what would be the consequences out of it? And I can't even describe it with words because it was so profound. These things can't be described properly with words, but I just, in that moment, it moved from I need to be in the now to here. Yes, I do need to be. That's it. That's my thing. I need to be in silence. I need to be in the now. And I felt it. I think that's the best thing that I can describe it. That silent drop came as a feeling, as a deep knowing. Yes, okay, I get it now. And I would say that was also definitely a silent drop. So
I'm glad you said that for so many reasons. First of all, silent knowledge can come in so many different ways. You can get this drop of information and you might not even understand it. But if you simply are present, then you even, as you did, you then get the full explanation of what it means. So it's all available. And all we need to do really is just stay out of our own way. Don't get into the question asking. Just stay out of your own. Just be the witness, experience and enjoy, and know that anything you don't immediately understand, it will get explained to you.
Yeah, it does.
This is what I want to say. All that we're talking about is actually one of the most revolutionary acts a human being can do, because it's no coincidence that most people don't ever do this, and it's also no coincidence that the airwaves are completely bombarded with information. We've never had so much information bombarding the human race than we have right now. And it's an ironic thing, you have so much information, but you often don't know what to do with it. But when you do this going within process, then the thing that comes up is not something for someone else, it's for you. That's the real beauty of it. And because it's for you, you have this sense of knowing its authenticity. I mean, there are so many people, for example, putting information on media about diet. People should eat this, people should eat that. I always say, if asked, best thing to do is find out what your own body wants.
Yeah.
Well, when you do this silent work, it can be really prosaic, pragmatic things such as it would be a really good idea for you to eat more of that, or it would be a good idea if you stop eating that. It can be that mundane, or it can be that far out, the information that you end up receiving.
Yeah, exactly. And for example, what you said to me, it got to some level here, but it, like that, I recognize it as my deepest truth needed to come from the moment of silence and my own being speaking to me and saying, hey, you know, you really got to be in the silence. And it's true. Like, there's so much information that people receive. You should do this and that's blah, blah, blah. And yeah, technically that's good advice, but is it also applicable to you? Your being will tell you when you allow that space to arise within yourself so that it can actually speak to you and show you.
It most certainly will. And then just to go into this thing about other information, like you might be reading something, whatever it is. When you have practice and experience of being in the silence, you'll discover something quite remarkable, which is you're reading something. And the way I can notice what you said about it's almost impossible to find the language sometimes. So the nearest I can get to this is like sometimes I'm reading something which comes from a person that's obviously done a lot of inner work. And I will suddenly get this feeling like there is a bell in my soul, and someone just struck the bell like dong.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I hear that kind of dong sound when I'm reading something, then that means this is the green light. This information is not only useful for that person, this is your truth as well. So you can really own this and add this to your understanding of life and the universe and how it all works. It's lovely to have that. And then the other thing that you tend to get is when someone's coming up with a load of old da, 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 I've got this thing called a bullshitometer. And no, don't pay attention to that. No, it's really not appropriate. Just let them say it, but you don't need to get hooked into any of that stuff. So it can really help you in terms of having discernment of information that comes from the outside, both yes and
So powerful. I hope that this is really what people take away from this video, if anything, to really use this space to just allow your own insights, your own intuition, your own inner being to speak to you, and in an absolute clarity, like that, you know for sure there's a million people that will tell you should do this and that, but which of the things are actually meant for you. Yeah. That's why I wanted to have the weekly silence. This is actually the reason why I want to have the weekly silence or longer silence in Human Plus, like fully integrated, because I want people to experience, their own, themselves on this deeper level, so that they can also then, even within Human Plus, say, this is for me, this is not for me, I resonate with this, blah blah blah. Of course I want them to stay in Human Plus and be part of the community, but more so I want people to develop their own inner strength, and whether that's within Human Plus or within something else, like at the end of the day, I don't care. That's what I want. That's my intention for being here on this planet, to help people remember themselves. So that's why I think it's so powerful to have a space like that.
It most certainly is. The only person who can be you is you.
As you, yeah.
And if you actually stop being what other people tell you to be, then you can fully be you. And that's how we engage with our full personal power, ultimately. Yeah. Become the movers and shakers we always know we are destined to be.
Yeah. With that being said, let's wrap up the call here. Because actually what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the beach and have 3 hours of silence for myself. And interesting enough, I found myself doing the call. I was like, because this morning I really felt like I want to go to the beach after I spoke to you and watch the sunset and be by myself. And then on this call, even my mind kicks in and says like, you got this to do, you have to call back this person. And like, now it's 3 p.m. here. And I'm like, no, Kat, I'm going. I knew this morning I have time. I can make time to do it. So I'm going. And I feel like this is a really nice wrap up of this call. But before you do your singing bowl, would you like to add anything to it, or anything unspoken?
I like what you just said, because you just answered the question that neither of us asked, which is, what are you going to do at the end of the call? So you've given a beautiful answer. You're going to go to the beach and you're going to connect with the elements, particularly the element of earth and air and water in your case. So having heard what you just said and feeling so inspired, it's wonderful. So I'm simply going to go to the trees and I'm going to be listening, because we've got quite a windy day today, so I'm going to be listening to quite strong, powerful wind in the trees. So that's what I'm going to do. And that is it. Yeah. I mean, whenever you've had time, like what we've just been doing, you've been sharing a lot with someone, even if it's only just for a few minutes, just go and have a little bit of time just for you. Best thing I can think of to say to finish this.
Beautiful.
So without further ado, I shall finish with the bowl.
Yes.
Here we go.